Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the show. This episode is brought to you by The Wellness Paradigm, a holistic health coaching company shifting the way that women understand and heal their bodies. Through bioenergetic testing, functional lab testing, and functional nutrition, we uncover what traditional approaches often overlook. So you can stop guessing, start healing, and finally feel like yourself again. No more one-size-fits-all protocols, just real answers, deep-rooted healing, and the clarity and confidence you deserve to feel incredible. It's time to shift the paradigm of women's health. Now, on to our show. And good afternoon, Jen.
Hello, how are you, Shannon?
I'm great, and I'm so excited you're here. And it's been a long time since we actually seen each other in person, but I really wanted to bring her on the show and bring a really beautiful perspective that she brings to a lot of our clients around food, working out, body, because she is an online health and fitness coach who really works with women who have struggled with a lot of disordered eating patterns in the past and really want to optimize their long-term health. And I know something you work on is not just physically, right? Physically, emotionally, mentally. And so let's kind of dive in. Give us a little bit of an idea on who you are and how you got started in this work.
Yeah, so it's always interesting, like thinking back to who I was before, or like when I started getting into this, because I was the person that I kind of help now in a different way. I had grown up just like not really understanding fitness or the body, but I was a very athletic person in my high school years, and I played all the sports and I ran. And when I became an adult, I actually fluctuated with my weight a lot. And I remember like doing 100 crunches in my room trying to get abs and like struggling with always feeling hungry and never really understanding like why I was blowing up and gaining so much weight. So I'd gained about like 30 to 50 pounds at different points in my life, and then really gone through a lot of unhealthy approaches to getting that off, as I think many of us have done. And, cutting out carbs and over exercising and, going through those all or nothing things. And I started doing fitness competitions, which didn't help at all. Little did I know at the time that was, leading to more issues around food. And it just led me to a place where, even though at the time I was, a certified trainer, I had been working with clients, I was doing my degree in exercise science and working with, different populations, I still had no idea how to make that stick for me. I was on and off with my fitness, and it really took me kind of burning myself into the ground with the competition lifestyle that I was living to realize that this just wasn't working. Like something is not working here. I'm continuously, not being able to stay consistent or not seeing weight loss eating 1,500 calories a day, and then
Mhm.
going through, tons of binge eating issues, and, just feeling like I have to eat tilapia and broccoli all the time, or I'm eating chips all day and ice cream, and, struggling with the way that that made me feel, especially as a coach, where I'm like, I should be able to eat healthy and stay consistent with my fitness. So it
Mhm.
wasn't really until I kind of hit rock bottom with that, where I felt completely out of control, that I started to shift my approach and really look at the relationship with food, the mindset, the identity shifts, the beliefs, and the all or nothing behaviors that had, kind of kept me in this downward spiral. And that's ultimately what created my business, which is Beyond Body, where we work with women who have traditionally, lost the weight and kept it off for a short period of time, but it doesn't ever last really long, or we end up, finding ourselves in a worse place later on because we don't have healthy coping habits, or we, are scared of gaining weight, and so we hyper obsess around the scale, or there's different behaviors that kind of lead to maybe just not having the healthiest relationship with fitness and our bodies. And so that's really where the name came from my business, which is Beyond Body Coaching. Is like, yes, we want to feel good in our clothes, we usually want to lose weight, we want to look sexy and feel sexy in a bikini, but it's about more than that. It's about actually being able to be present in our lives and not obsessing about our bodies. It's about feeling like we can go on adventures and not feel scared of being out of breath or hurting ourselves on a hike with friends, or just being able to say yes to, initiating sex and doing all the things, and having healthy relationships and making great memories. And that's really like what gets me really passionate about working with women. Is like, sure, we can lose the 15, 20 pounds, we can fit in the jeans, but like you're going to be just feeling like a fox and feeling confident and feeling like you own the room when you're at a event or a work thing or whatever. And that kind of confidence is really what we kind of try to rock the most with coaching clients.
Yeah, I feel like our story is so similar. There's
Yeah,
so
we do have a
many
lot of
overlaps.
similarities.
But yeah, it's so much more than just that scale, and that's a hard thing to break up with, right? Especially when
Mhm.
you have these disordered eating patterns and maybe control issues, which is probably where a lot of your clients maybe stem from too, is just like feeling just this out of control and trying to figure out what you can do to just reel it back in. I would love to kind of go down that rabbit hole on what were some of I don't want to say the mindset shifts that you really had to overcome in order to get your body and your mind in the place it is now.
Yeah, I think a big thing for me was I always felt like my body was broken. Like my
Mm.
family genetically is not very healthy. They've all been quite overweight. All my mom's sisters on her side have had breast reduction surgeries because they're very top heavy and just very heavy in general. Lots of diabetes run in the family. Like I'm not the person who is just naturally fit or small. And I definitely thought that I just had a shitty metabolism and I just had, something that didn't allow me to experience the success that others did. I would see people, especially when social media became a thing, women eating 2,100 calories. I remember, I can't remember her name of the competitor. Her name was Justine something, and she was from Ontario. She had the best glutes, but I'm going to look this up after. But she was like talking about eating, 2,100 calories or 2,400 calories in her off season, and she was, jacked and lean. And I was like, this is crazy. That could never be me. And I was someone who was struggling to lose weight at 1,500 calories or 1,600 calories and just feeling miserable. And one of the things that really helped me was moving away from the competition scene and having friends as well as some people that I knew in the industry who were like, you just need to build muscle. You need to focus on eating more for a period of time. You need to, improve your metabolism, step away from chronic dieting. And it was a really scary thing for me. I remember going to, I did have physical goals as well. I still wanted to look lean. I wanted to look jacked. I wanted to look like I worked out. And so I did do, measurements and scale weight. And I remember I had a trainer, she was an IFBB pro, and we would do our weigh-ins, and she would notice that I wasn't gaining weight as much as I should have been. And she kept kind of challenging me, like, are you okay with gaining weight? Like, are you still eating enough? Because I would start to almost subconsciously like skip meals and get a little bit scared of, getting a heavier body. And it wasn't until I continued to like have to get reminded like the goal is to see the scale go up. The goal is to gain muscle. Like why am I half in, half out? I have to if I'm going to try to change this, I have to fully commit to it. So there was a lot of mental stuff that I had to go through to accept the fact that my clothes might get a little tighter, which was something that I always had a lot of fear around because I'd ballooned up so much in my off season and rebounded that it felt like controlling and keeping in the size jeans or the size underwear that I felt my best in was like it was just this control issue and it was this safety thing that I knew I wasn't going into an extreme, but it did hold me back. And there were a few things that I had to experience, especially as someone who wanted to build better glutes and wanted to do those things that I had a coach who said like the booty's got to go somewhere because I was like my clothes are getting tighter and like I'm feeling uncomfortable, like my jeans are getting tighter. And even though I wasn't like gaining fat and I was still quite lean, I was like, oh yeah, if I'm going to have a booty, I'm not going to always be a size small in my underwear, or, I'm going to maybe be a little tighter in the jeans, the skinny jeans that I've traditionally worn when I was, 19, 20 years old. Like it's not going to make sense for me to use that as the standard. So that was a big shift for me, as well as looking back at the cycle of where things shifted for me when I went through an all or nothing spiral, where I had these all behaviors where I, meal prepped and I went to the gym 5 days a week and I did all the cardio and I did these things until I was burnt out. I was frustrated. I was tired. I was, missing my friends. I was bored of my food. I was craving this stuff that I couldn't have or I felt like I couldn't have. And then I would go into an extreme in the other end of the spectrum and not be moving at all, not wanting to work out, not wanting to look at my food or put effort into my food, not wanting to eat vegetables. Like I was so sick of just eating vegetables and fish all the time. And like, definitely still can't eat tilapia. Definitely have a hard time with some of the foods that I ate during those seasons, where I had to start to look at like what would the middle ground look like if I'm doing this all stuff 50% of the time and I'm doing the nothing stuff 50% of the time, what does actually like 90% or 80% look like? And how much more could I stay consistent by having some chocolate chips every day in my Greek yogurt bowl and maybe having some homemade chicken tenders with some, healthy breading or something, and maybe some French fries with a chicken burger, or things that I had traditionally banned or thought were bad foods, or that I wasn't allowed to have when I competed because they didn't fit my, meal plan. So big thing for me was learning how to track macros and learning how to shift my relationship with those foods, where I found a lot of joy in looking at I can actually eat these foods and see progress. And it healed a lot inside of me, where I had thought that those things would lead to gaining weight or bloating or whatever. And so, I went through a period of time where I had French fries with a steak every night for dinner for like a couple months, and I continued to see more and more progress in my body. And I was just so stoked. I was so happy that I was like, wow, I had no idea I could do this and eat these types of foods and see more progress than I did before, because the amount of time that I was actually able to stay consistent with that all approach that I'd had in the past was just very minimal, like maybe 2, 3 weeks at a time.
Yeah, I mean that restriction mindset just wrecks you. And for
Yeah.
me, macros was a lifesaver, a game changer really, for the time being. Now I have kind of gotten away from it for a hot sec. Um,
Yeah.
but but just being able to learn how to eat what's in our food, that foods aren't bad or good, right? But that would you find when you deal with more disordered eating patterns? Do you find that that is kind of a slippery slope with tracking?
It can be. And I actually just had a discussion with a client last night who, she has been trying to heal her relationship with food. And she was at a social event, and someone said that they were really worried about her because she mentioned she was tracking food. And she was like, no, I want to do this and I enjoy it. And they were like, I'm really worried about you. And I don't think you should be doing that if you want to be healthy. And that's a really common,
Yeah.
assumption or perspective traditionally, because people have not approached it from a healthy perspective, or they haven't had guidance and support with it. And the goals that they have in approaching that is usually coming from a place of like, I can't eat over this amount, or, there's still some judgment over the types of foods that you're including. And so I'm really focused on always just understanding that we're just trying to get information. Even if I'm eating a lot more food than my goal is at the time, I'm going to eat it anyways, regardless if I want to look at the numbers or not. So if I'm able to track it and just look at it with a very neutral perspective of like, okay, I'm going through a season of having more hunger, whether it's hormonal issues happening and fluctuations, or it's stress, or it's just maybe I, have felt really bored with my food, or I'm getting into a season of like wanting more sugar or something, just being able to look at it as information and not, I can't have this, or this is bad. It's always confronting in a really good way for me, where I can hear those voices coming up a little bit and I can look at them and be like, okay, like what's actually true here? So I always tell people the come from is really important, because if you're coming from a place of like, I can't eat this, or I shouldn't be doing this, or this is bad, this is wrong, this is me, losing control, then it's going to feel really unhealthy. And for me, there have been times where I just don't care to track macros, or I don't want to for different reasons, where I can handle taking a break because I'm maintenance, or I'm, just chilling with my goals. But generally speaking, I just don't struggle anymore with food and in tracking macros. And that's, I think, in part due to the way that I approach it and the way that I coach my clients to approach it as well.
Yeah. What would you say are kind of the biggest mindset blocks that you see with clients coming in, wanting to kind of have this healthier relationship, wanting to change their body, but have some blocks doing it?
Yeah, I think there's usually like a few things that come up with that. And one of them is often a fear of carbs. Unfortunately, I think with a lot of information that we've seen in, like, I think it's called skinny talk and fit talk and just social media in general, there's been, a lot of information that's been cherry picked that's very convincing around why, this would be unhealthy for women, or why, you should be intermittent fasting and eating, more frequently might be unhealthy, or different foods that are, that are just very dangerous for you for different reasons. And I think that what happens a lot is that the women that I work with have a lot of fear around food, which we know as orthorexia, where you're actually now more unhealthy because you have banned or demonized certain foods that don't really need to be receiving that kind of label and kind of are falsely put in a category of something that is not helpful for you. For example, and a lot of women who don't want to eat red meat for reasons of, cancer causing or whatever. And when we actually look at the data, that's not necessarily true. And so it takes a lot of exposure to these things to have those conversations where I have a lot of clients who are like, I ate, this thing and now I'm feeling like, my nutrition was like a 5 out of 10 this week, or I ate very unhealthy. And when I ask them, like, what did you eat that you feel is unhealthy, or why is this unhealthy, or what does your version of health look like? We start to look at, oh, there might be some misinformation here, or there might be, just looking at the hierarchy of what's important in terms of macronutrients, micronutrients, or just like, fueling yourself, eating a variety of foods that those things might not actually be that unhealthy for you. It might actually be this idea that you can't have the cake and the chocolate sometimes that is leading to you going through binge cycles where you're actually having greater periods of time with a greater volume of food with foods that have less nutrient density in them because you are so scared of what that means to have that one piece of cake and how much you judge yourself for it. So I actually look at it as like a pressure release valve where sometimes if we have, for example, I have chocolate chips in my Greek yogurt. I think I said that already every day. And for me, that has completely eliminated any kind of chocolate or sweets binges. I don't ever have that happen at all. It hasn't happened in over 5 years, even through, hormonal cycles and grieving and loss and stuff. And that's a pretty cool thing coming from someone who has leaned on that as a coping mechanism. And one of the things that does help with that is that I don't actually build up a desire for it because I'm constantly exposing myself to those foods and I'm eating them in moderation where it doesn't have any pull anymore. Like it doesn't have any draw because I eat something like that almost every single day. So that's a big one is just like, these foods that we've banned and these foods that we have a lot of judgment around ourselves for, specifically sugar and carbs is a big one that I see. And I would also say like having this mentality that if you are not tracking everything, prepping everything, in charge of everything that's going into your food, that you've, fallen off the wagon and the weekend hits and you're, in this place of, well, I'm just going to throw in the towel. So those are the things that you usually see happening a lot is this fear of your own judgment, usually around the foods that you're eating because you have labeled them and, made them mean something about your own ability to succeed or your own worthiness, because typically when we have perfectionist tendencies, we're externalizing our worth. So we're placing that judgment on our, value, our ability to succeed, our ability to be healthy on I'm following these protocols. And therefore, if I follow these protocols, I'm good enough. And we're putting that good enoughness on something other than our own feelings about ourselves. And that comes up a lot. There's a lot to unpack there, but that's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, definitely. The mindset around that is huge. I remember I can't remember what it's called in more of a psychology setting, but it's like having a cookie every single night. Like I remember having a few clients back in the day where it's like, I want you to have a cookie every single night. And they're like, what? Like I can't do that. It was like earth shattering. And then it was like, just for 1 week. I just want to, and then guess what? They never craved cookies again. That craving kind of had went away. They realized, wait a minute, I didn't gain weight this week. Right? And then suddenly you like were kind of not forced, but ate it every day. You're like, wait, I don't actually really even want the cookie. And so it's like I remember those kind of moments being so life-changing for clients, and it's so simple. It was just like not a huge deal, but it was just that little bit of a shift. Obviously, some clients it requires a little bit more in-depth work, but have you ever done anything like that with your clients?
Oh, all the time. Yeah, when I look at like the periods of time where we're like quote unquote falling off the wagon and we're not tracking our food and we're feeling a lot of shame and we're feeling like we're losing control, I'm always curious about what foods they're eating. Like, what are those things that you're eating? Is it crunchy? Is it salty? Is it sweet? Is it creamy? Like, what are the things that you're craving? And how often are you eating that throughout the week when you're actually on top of your A game and tracking it, because most of the time it's due to a lack of those things that we actually do enjoy. We're kind of gaslighting ourselves into believing or wanting to believe that we don't need those foods because of the shame we have around them and the labels that we have on them. So when I call people out on that and I'll ask, like, what kinds of foods did you eat and what did you not track? I'll usually encourage them to incorporate that daily. And from there, we usually say that we just don't need to, go off the rails, because we're eliminating that judgment on that food. We're eliminating that label on it. And like you said, we're actually seeing progress. So there's no off switch. There's no end point to that, because we're eating the foods that we have traditionally, had when we have a bad day and we just need to get it out of our system and we just need a little break. But if you don't need a break from the food that you're eating and you're just enjoying the things that you're eating in abundance regularly, then there's no, even on the bad days, you're like, well, I'm just going to keep eating the food I was already eating. Like, it's fairly simple when you put it that way. But a big part of that is also looking at the data. And you and I talked before we started the episode about how we're both very logical people. I tend to get a lot of women who are also very logical. And when we look at the data of how many calories you eat, Monday through Friday, when you're prepping all your food and you're eating your salads and you're doing those things, versus the following weekend or even the following weeks where you might be just kind of eating the whole house and having those behaviors that we're maybe not as proud of around food, it's actually a lot more food on average than if you were to eat a higher calorie intake daily for a longer period of time. So for example, trying to eat 1,400 calories Monday through Friday, but then you're eating 2,500 for a week after because you didn't work out and you feel really guilty, and then you go and have the chips and you have the takeout and you're in this kind of like addiction cycle almost of like the sugar and the fast food. It's actually less calories overall if you eat 1,800 calories a day usually. And most people get really scared of eating that amount of food because it feels like too much and it feels like more than they've ever eaten. And that's part of, like you asked earlier, what helps with that mindset around, eating and tracking food not being unhealthy. And that's a big part of it, is actually that your targets are usually more realistic and more based on how to serve you to fuel yourself properly and to feel nourished. And when you have no nutrient deficiencies, or you're improving maybe the level of deficiency that you might have on a regular basis, as well as having, enough sustenance to feel fullness and to feel those hunger signals and that satiety, you actually will go through less of the craving cycle and the hunger cycle that can be kind of exaggerated when you have stressful days, or you have a fight with your partner, or you have, your period hits. So it's like damage control. You're kind of avoiding those cycles from happening through a multitude of different approaches that can work for different reasons and different beliefs that we have and different assumptions that we have around food.
Yeah. Now, if somebody was wanting to work on their health, maybe they don't have the best patterns of eating, what would be, maybe they are also not ready to hire somebody. They want to kind of do this on their own, but they want some better strategies. What would be maybe two or three things that you would tell them to kind of get them started in the right direction?
Yeah, there's some basic things that we start with, even if you are working with a coach, that can be really effective. One of them is to make sure that there's no good or bad foods. You're obviously trying to eat, around 80% whole foods. You're trying to eat, the rainbow, eat lots of fruits and veggies, lots of fiber, lots of protein, and then also include the 20% of the other things that you would traditionally feel are bad. That can eliminate that cycle of on and off when you have those things sprinkled throughout the day, where you don't have this on or off switch in your brain. You're just normalizing enjoying those foods. And also, because you're nourishing yourself with, at a baseline, having high nutrient dense foods, then you actually will crave or need less of those foods traditionally. The second thing would be to have some staple meals or anchor meals. Some people also know those as skeleton meals, where you have some of your go-to meals that you have planned out that you love to eat pretty much daily. You have the same breakfast bowl, you have the same kind of smoothie. Maybe you change out the type of fruit or the flavor of protein powder or the type of milk, or you put some different, beet powder or spirulina or like something in there that makes you feel good or changes up the flavors. But generally speaking, it's the same skeleton. It's the same type of baseline, the same portion sizes, and the same elements or components when we look at like carbs, macros, fats. you can obviously, have some variety with that, but it just allows you to take out a lot of the decision making, which is usually where we start to fall into this quick fix cycle of like wanting something easy and fast, where we'll, order the Uber Eats, or we will pick something up on the way home. But when we have things that are almost on autopilot that we don't have to think about, that just are normally like how we love to eat, that feel good. Like I love tacos and I have tacos all the time. And I'll change up the type of shell that I have. I'll change up the toppings. I'll change up even the meat fillings. I'll change up the sides. I'll have different types of things that I'll have with it, or I'll turn it into like a taco bowl. Those kinds of things. It's literally the same amount of everything, but it's just kind of tastes different with that. So the two things again would be to, follow that 80-20 rule, have, the removal of that judgment, or trying to remove that on and off switch. Second thing would be to have some staple meals or repeatable meals that you have. And the third thing that I would suggest, if you're open to it, would be to just have a list of food that you're eating, like track it like on a note on your phone, or write it down in your planner. You actually being able to recall the food that you're eating and the amounts is actually something, even if you're not looking at the amount of calories or macros that are in those things, is helping you learn how much you're eating every day, and just having a little bit more self-awareness around what you're putting into your body. It's actually through the conscious awareness of the extra bites, licks, and tastes, or the snacks that we have, or the meal that we skipped, where we start to look at that piece of paper and go, oh, well, here's a pattern. I didn't eat breakfast, and then I had coffee at lunch with a donut or a muffin. And at night, that's when I start to go into the chips and the takeout and stuff. So you don't even need a coach to tell you what's happening. You can see the cycle just because you're reflecting on it. And it's very similar in the way that, macro tracking or having a therapist works, where, not that those are the same things, but that just by saying those things out loud and hearing yourself say them, or writing them down and seeing yourself write them, it actually does a lot to teach you what's happening without having to overwhelm yourself with data and numbers, or things that might not feel, especially if you don't have a coach, it can feel overwhelming. It can feel, I don't know how much to eat. I don't know what's right or what's wrong. Just start with what you're already doing, and just make some small tweaks to, add a little bit more structure to it, or, some different kinds of, goalposts that you have in terms of what you want to approach it with.
Yeah, I love all of those. Now, if somebody wanted to get started on their journey and actually like hire somebody, maybe they're interested in a little bit more in what you do in your work, where can they connect with you? Where's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, best way to reach out is Instagram. I'm always on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at Jen Rudy Fitness, JenRudy Fitness. That's like my main hub, where I have a lot of things. We actually are doing our coaching scholarship until the end of the month. I'm not sure when this episode is going to come out, but you can apply, and you can actually be one of our winners of actually getting a full free scholarship for one-to-one coaching, or some of our partial scholarships, which basically will significantly give you a scholarship or a grant, essentially, to fund your journey through coaching and working on your relationship with food and your strength training and all those kinds of things. So that's the best place to find me. I also have my own podcast, which is called the Beyond Body Show, but all the links are on my Instagram. So you can click on the drop down menu there, and you'll see all the things that we have. We also have a Facebook group where we do lots of free events and challenges and lives and stuff. So if you're someone that's like, wow, this is stuff that seems really valuable for me, definitely check it out, because there's a lot of different ways to connect. And I love just like having people involved in the community, because it's such a meaningful journey, I think, for all of us women to get to a place where we're feeling confident in our bodies, and we're not just constantly trying to shrink ourselves down, or, shame ourselves into change. And when you really have those pieces clicking, it's completely transformational in how you relate to others and how you connect with yourselves. And it's like the reason why I get up in the morning every day and bang my head on the wall that I have to be on Instagram. It's like, I just love having those people that it really means something to, and it makes it all the worthwhile. And I'm sure all of us who run online businesses can relate in some ways to that constant pressure of showing up and stuff. So I truly do love just like meeting people and hearing something that they loved about something I said, or having a free resource or something that they've been using, and it just keeps me going with everything.
Yeah, yeah, that love is You can tell I know you're a passionate coach too, and not everybody's like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So wonderful. I will definitely put her information down below. Go check her out. Go check out her podcast, or just connect with her on IG if you are wanting to kind of go into that direction. But thank you, Jen, so much for being here. Thank you, listeners, for being here. Really appreciate you as well. And we'll catch you guys on the next show. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks, Shannon.